Welcome to Church and State with Chris Ferrara and Brian McCall. This week we have some really interesting things that have been happening in Church and State that are going to give us an opportunity to talk about some key principles, Catholic principles about the church and the world. But let's start with the big news of the week. LA is burning, basically. I mean, it's chaos been going on. As we record this, there's even more protests and mayhem planned for this coming weekend. So let's start with the principle, first of all, Chris, that, I mean, is violent protesting, damaging property, breaking into things, a legitimate form of political expression?
Let me see.
It seems to be a difficult question for people today.
That would be no.
Now, I mean,
I just consulted my First Amendment handbook. I just looked. It says right here that violent protest is not allowed. Okay, we got that nailed down. Good.
But I mean, when the government's doing bad things like making people who forgot their documents leave the country, I mean, doesn't that justify doing more than just complaining?
Well, of course, illegal aliens are not illegal. They're a cherished, protected class, and they must remain here. And the thinking behind that is, well, we might have these immigration laws that everybody else followed, waiting 7 years to get a green card. But why should they have to do that when all they have to do is consult an app on their iPhones provided by the Biden administration, file a fake asylum claim, and walk across the border, and then they get everything without having to wait more than 15 minutes. That's perfectly obvious, isn't it? We shouldn't really be concerned about 25 million or 20 million people entering the country on a flimsy pretext or with no pretext at all, just walking in. What's the problem?
Well, that's essentially what they're saying. I mean, it was funny. I saw one CNN commentator go crazy saying, "Stop calling them illegal." They said, "Well, it is illegal to enter the country." She's like, "Well, it's only a misdemeanor."
Actually, is it a misdemeanor? I thought it was a felony. If you,
yeah, I'm not sure of that itself. But it's.
I know that hiding or harboring an illegal alien is
a felony. Yes. Speaking of harboring, not much happening with the mayor of Los Angeles, the governor of New York, to sort of protect his citizens from looting. There's been concrete stones thrown on police vehicles, fireworks shot at people. So Donald Trump has mobilized the National Guard, the California National Guard, and a couple hundred Marines that he said he's going to use to restore order. So now we get to the issue: is this legitimate? I mean, Gavin Newsom, in a hilarious event, went on YouTube to denounce it, and his audio broke down, so it was actually a silent video. But he basically then filed in a federal court saying this was unconstitutional and illegal, and Trump was a dictator seizing power. I mean, has Trump overstepped the line here?
Well, I'm one of these people that thinks maybe we should just look at the actual statute and see if the statute authorizes what he did. And the judge did look at the statute, but he left out the third part. He said, "Oh, there's no insurrection here. There's no war here." Yes, but what about the third part, judgy-wudgy, which says, or the president is unable otherwise to execute the laws of the United States. And that's the catch-all provision that allows him to send in the National Guard when people are interfering with the attempt to take illegal aliens and remove them from the country. But the judge overlooked that part. Thankfully, the Ninth Circuit immediately granted an administrative stay on the appeal, because a federal judge has no business telling the president when he can commandeer state National Guards under the Constitution and the relevant statute. It's just another one of these ipsy dixit fantastical injunctions by these federal judges who think that they're the president of the United States.
Well, and to be clear about this, because a lot of the news people are saying the Constitution doesn't allow this. First of all, I got my copy of the Constitution. I don't see anything about the National Guard in there, first of all. So they're acting like there's some provision in the Constitution that says only governors can use the National Guard. So is it a constitutional issue or a statutory issue?
It's a statutory issue, right, actuating powers of the Article 2 executive branch by means of a statutory enactment, which allows them to federalize the state National Guard. Now, we might not like that if it happened to our side of the political divide. But we certainly couldn't get a Republican judge to issue an injunction because Republican judges don't do this kind of thing.
Right. I mean, they follow the law. Okay.
Yeah, well, that inconvenient thing that we call, how shall I say, the law.
Right. Well, so you point out what happened. Newsom ran into court, found a liberal Democrat judge to say, stop, you can't protect federal buildings. You can't actually stop looters. Go away, Donald Trump. And that lasted for all of a few hours. What do you think the ultimate outcome of this is, though? The Ninth Circuit did just pause things. And again, I think prudently, because do you really want to be the judges that people die or get injured because you stopped the president of the United States from protecting them?
Oh, I love this. Under Rule 65, which covers injunctions, or even the old Writs Act, you have to put up a bond. Okay. So what did the district judge in this case say about the bond that's required in case the injunction you get causes damage? Oh, we'll put up $100 bond. So, so if police officers get killed, if National Guardsmen get killed, well, that $100 should cover the funeral expenses, right? I mean, a minimal bond in a case involving a national security issue with violence in a city where death is a probable result or serious injury. He says you can put up $100 bond to the governor of California who has billions of dollars at his disposal. It should be $1 billion bond.
Yeah, extraordinary. Well, I'd like to approach this not from a legal point of view, but from a Catholic point of view, because there's a handful of Catholic commentators out there who have never met an illegal alien they didn't like, who are wringing their hands saying, Catholic social principles of subsidiarity mean that this is horrible because the governor should do it, and this is against Catholic principles of subsidiarity. So do they have a point? Would a Catholic approach to this say the president of the United States should never do something like this? It should only be left to the states.
Let's assume you can make a colorable argument based on the principle of subsidiarity. Where were these clowns when the federal government became the all-encompassing octopus that violates the principle of subsidiarity in every single state of the union, every single day of the year? Where were they then? They don't care about the principle of subsidiarity. Here's what they care about. Donald Trump is for it. We're against it. That's what animates this whole clown show, because Trump is doing common sense things, but they oppose Trump, so they have to oppose his common sense things. And that's why we're getting these fantastical judges with their fantastical injunctions attempting to enjoin the presidency. I think we've made this joke before. Why don't they just get right to the point, find a federal judge to enjoin the presidency? Wouldn't that be much simpler?
Wow. Well, and again, you're right. Good point. These people 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when the federal government was mandating experimental things be put into people, didn't really care about subsidiarity when they told it was an act of charity to go do it. But, even on that point, I mean, subsidiarity does say that the lower order, the order closest to the problem, should be left to deal with the problem to the extent it can. I mean, I think that's an important corollary, or that people forget. That the higher order, the greater, or the order further away from the people, has actually an obligation to intervene when it's beyond the scope of the closer or smaller governmental unit to solve a problem. And I mean, do you think factually on the ground we have, evidence that the California is unable, or more likely unwilling, to put an end to this?
Well, that's the statutory scheme, isn't it? Statutory scheme doesn't say the president can federalize the National Guard whenever he feels like it, because that would mean he's a king, as they say. No, it says that if there's a failure of the principle of subsidiarity and localities cannot ensure the enforcement of federal immigration law, then and only then the president can federalize the National Guard. And that's exactly what the statute allows. That's exactly what he did. And that's exactly what the district judge in the Ninth Circus ignored. He just ignored that part of the statute and pretended that Trump was using the idea of a war or an insurrection. It was actually an insurrection, too.
Well, and
a war or an invasion.
Yeah.
It is an invasion, but he doesn't have to rely on the invasion prong. He can just say, I can't execute federal laws because the governor won't do anything. Local police were told to stand down, and the rioters are out of control. So subsidiarity actually is being respected here.
So ultimately, now again, the FBI has said they're going to investigate who's funding this, but everybody seems to know this is not just spontaneous, good-natured citizens going out to express their opinion. These are organized. There's ads all over the internet and social media to pay people to go to these riots. But what do you think, whoever they are that's behind this, what do you think they hope to accomplish? Why would you purposefully throw a city, an area into violent mayhem?
Oh, I know exactly what they hope to accomplish. They're hoping to get a George Floyd out of this. They're just dying to have the National Guard shoot somebody or hit somebody with a baton and send them into a coma. Then they can have their martyr. They are dying to be arrested. They are dying to be martyrized. This is what this is all about. And so they're creating this mayhem so they can get their martyr. And of course, they create the violence to disrupt what Trump is doing because they hate Trump and they hate what he stands for, which is overturning the corrupt status quo of the last 4 years, most of the last 25 years under Democrat administrations. So this is all about disruption for the sake of disruption because they hate Trump and they want to create a situation where they can get themselves a martyr. Like that stupid Senator Padilla. He shows up in civilian clothes. Nobody knows who the heck the guy is. He starts lunging at Kristi Noem because he can't get close enough to ask a question. They say, step back. He won't step back. So they cuff the guy, not even knowing who he is. How dare they manhandle a United States senator dressed up like a civilian that nobody knew was a senator? That's going to be good for about 24 hours of outrage, and we'll move on to the next fake outrage.
So, I mean, do you think they're going to succeed? To some extent, I think they did succeed in 2020. They created mayhem and really, distracted Trump and affected the election. What do you think is going to backfire on them this time?
Oh, people are not buying it anymore. The gaslighting, the performative demonstrations, the fake outrage. This is all basically the legacy media, the cable channels. Nobody watches those idiots anymore. What the CNN's viewership is like 348,000. I think if you want to cook a crepe on the Food Channel, you're going to be among 370,000 people watching that.
Wow.
The Food Channel is outperforming CNN. They're a bunch of liars, 24/7 liars. It's all lies all the time, and everybody knows it. And this last election exposed it like never before. Trump was supposed to lose. He won in a landslide. So people are saying, well, I guess we can't rely on any of these polls. I guess you can't rely on anything CNN, NBC, MSNBC, ABC, CBS tell us. They're all lies all the time. It's not even bias anymore. This is just sustained, absolute lying propaganda every single day.
Well, we'll see. Like I said, as we record this, they've publicly announced they're going to bring this around the country over the Flag Day weekend, the weekend that commemorates the birth of the U.S. Army. And I think you're right. I think they are hunting for a cardboard martyr to hold up to invent a story to supposedly galvanize people, but we'll see how successful that is. Their old playbook. But meanwhile,
don't put it past them to stage some kind of a fatal incident.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I've done it before. But let's head over to the Vatican, and we're now several more weeks into the pontificate of Leo XIV. And, it's interesting. There's been a lot of aesthetic changes. I mean, he is going to move back into the Apostolic Palace.
Apparently, is that confirmed?
That's pretty much confirmed. The Vatican admitted that Francis's humility cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars a month.
Hey, Brian, listen, humility doesn't come cheap.
It doesn't. Hey, if you're going to have really high class humility, you got to spend the money. It was actually It was spending more money keeping him in the palatial amount of space that he needed in the Santa Marta, over like 2 floors. So Leo says he's going to go back, and he's been acting and speaking and dressing like a pope. Now, aesthetics are not everything, right? But they are something. And even his prayer video that Francis used to put out, which were just some of the craziest things, praying for the climate change agenda, was very normal. His first one he put out this month was the month of the Sacred Heart. to pray for compassion. And it says, he said that in the video, Jesus Christ's heart is the only source of compassion. Again, words of a pope. In terms of aesthetics, recently he met with the president of Italy, and for a formal diplomatic meeting, he dressed like a pope. Again, he wore the mazzetta, his stole, and wore his fisherman's ring. Francis, toward the end, and basically even stopped wearing the fisherman's ring, even in private audiences, we were told. But here we have somebody who looks like a statesman, looks like a pope. Do you think we're making too much of this, or do you think that these signs are positive?
Oh yeah, this is the age of optics, and this Pope knows exactly what he's doing optically. I think optically and acoustically, as Archbishop Gonswine put it, there's already a huge improvement. And our faith is a faith heavily laden with important symbolism. The papal garb is not just some vanity costume. It symbolizes the authority of the vicar of Christ. It's not about the man wearing the garment, it's about what the garment signifies. And he's signifying with this papal regalia the majesty of his office, because it's not about him. It's about him of whom he is the vicar. So I think those optics are very important. And I know of a moral certainty that he's trying to send a message that was not being sent before.
Well, and even on the basic level of take me seriously. I mean, Francis was very hard to take seriously, even at its basic level. But symbols, and as you said, optics are important. So I want to talk about a story that that happened at the beginning of the pontificate. J.D. Vance came, and J.D. Vance is a Catholic. He's a convert, kind of a little bit of slack. But he went to the inauguration of Pope Leo. He was invited, among others, to enter St. Peter's Basilica and greet the Pope. Now, traditionally, when greeting the Pope, a Catholic acknowledges the Pope's authority by bowing, at least, traditionally going down on his knee and kissing the Pope's ring as a sign of acknowledgement, acceptance of submission to Peter, which is one of the elements necessary for salvation. Well, J.D. Vance didn't do this. He just shook his hand. Now, again, you want to be careful, give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe he didn't realize what he was supposed to do. But no, he actually came out and clarified. He was asked in an interview, why did you not bow to the Pope or kiss his ring? So let's just listen for a second to his explanation, and then we'll talk about it.
I am a Catholic. I believe that he, meaning Pope Leo, is actually the shepherd of 1.4 billion Catholics. And so there are things like bowing before him, kissing the ring, that are signs of respect for a spiritual father, okay? But on the world stage, I'm not there as J.D. Vance, a Catholic parishioner. I'm there as the Vice President of the United States and the leader of the President's delegation to the Pope's inaugural Mass. And so, it was interesting. Some of the protocols about how I respond to the Holy Father were much different than how I might respond to the Holy Father. How might you might respond to the Holy Father purely in your capacity as a citizen. The protocol is that American presidents and vice presidents do not bow before foreign leaders do not kiss any rings. And obviously, given our history, you can appreciate that. So no sign of disrespect, but right. Important to observe the protocols of the country that I love and that I'm representing and that I serve as Vice President of the United States.
Wow.
So personally, I'm in favor of respecting the Pope, but as Vice President, no way.
Well, that's actually a very sound argument based upon these protocols. But the problem is the protocols. Why do we have these protocols where Catholics meet the Pope? Because their politicians have to pretend that when they're meeting the Pope, they're there only as politicians. Whatever happened to freedom of religion? Why shouldn't he be allowed to acknowledge the head of his religion? So this is the idea that Pierre Menant, the chastened liberal philosopher, expressed when he said that in regimes like the United States of America, we're required to be atheists under the one God, the God in whom we believe. So we have to say at one and the same time, I do solemnly swear, etc., so help me God. And also for a Supreme Court justice, we take an oath on the Bible. And if we're president, we take an oath on the Bible. But somehow when we meet the Pope, we're not religious figures anymore. We're just politicians. It's the schizophrenia of the modern political system and state secularity, the separation of church and state, which, of course, as we have seen and as the Pope's warned, and encyclical after encyclical is absolute madness and leads to the situation we see in this lunatic asylum of a country that we call the United States of America.
Hmm. Now, and again, it's really a Protestant error that goes back to the Protestant revolt of this idea of being able to separate the personal and the public, right? And even if you're not the vice president, the idea that on Sunday you can be a Christian, but when you go to work on Monday you can be a cutthroat business person because that's a different realm. That there's not a public corporate element of religion. It's a private matter for you and your personal Lord and Savior in your little room where you read your Bible.
Yeah, I mean, we have a situation in which God would need a visitor's pass to enter a government building. That's basically what it comes down to. It's absolutely ridiculous, especially in this circumstance where he's not even in a government building. He's in the Vatican City State. He should actually follow the protocols of the Vatican City State to recognize the head of that city state. So I would cut him slack. He's doing the best he can. He thinks he has to follow these protocols. We can't condemn him. He's making what he thinks is a sound argument. But maybe if he were to see this video or some other commentary along these lines, he would understand that he was under no moral obligation not to recognize the authority of his own shepherd as Catholic, because there's no division in the human person between the civic person and the religious person. And that's another thing Pierre Menent pointed out. We live in the age of divisions now, or the age of separations, as he called it. The separation of public and private morality, the separation of the public domain from the religious domain, from the separation of ethics from legislation, and so on. Everything is neatly separated into secular and religious components, which is like, as Leo said, removing the soul from the body. So you get this rotting corpse that we're fighting over now. Trump's doing the best he can within the framework. And, I do the best I can. In case any federal judge or adversary attorney is watching, obviously I recognize as an attorney I have to operate within this existing legal framework. I can't say that the First Amendment allows for mischief to be spread, which will mean the ruin of civil society. I can't say that in a brief, even though I believe it. So as Cardinal Ottaviani said, we appeal to the rights of men when the rights of God are not recognized. That's all we can do.
Well, it's similar to that famous speech that John F. Kennedy gave in Houston that, as a Catholic, his Catholic faith or the teaching of the Pope would have absolutely nothing to do with his presidency, which the insanity of which is we elect a president to exercise judgment. So he's basically saying my moral system will have no effect on the judgments I will make in my public life. I mean, it is, as you said, it essentially wants to separate the person, the body and the soul. And as Leo XIII said in his encyclical on this topic, the separation of the body and soul leads only to death.
Oh, this is the argument that had the Archies made before he converted to Catholicism, when he said, look, we are told that we cannot bring our moral system, so-called, into these constitutional disputes, and yet that's exactly what the left is doing. They're moralizing all over the place from the bench, and they're imposing their moral code on the rest of us. Although we had this great decision on DEI from the Supreme Court that you cannot have a special standard of discrimination for someone who happens to be a member of the majority. So some level of sanity has been restored there. Stop this moralizing by the left. Now it's more of an equal playing field, at least in that arena. But yeah, this is the problem. The left has its moral code, which is it ruthlessly imposes, and we say as conservatives, oh, we're just positivists. If it's a law, we'll enforce it, as Scalia famously said, or rather infamously. You write it, I'll enforce it, is how he put it.
It's interesting that the jurist, late 20th century jurist Ronald Dworkin, who really struggled with this, right? He realized that not only was positivism just a failure morally, but it wasn't even factually true. I mean, he said judges and those applying the law have to engage moral principles, but he basically can't bring himself to say, well, what are those moral principles? So he has to conclude, well, whatever their personal moral principles are, they have to engage 18th century liberal political philosophy because that's the best we've got.
Yeah, which is an utterly arbitrary standard. And so, the standard underlying all notions of justice is ultimately a divine standard. I think it was Cardinal Manning who said that all political disputes ultimately resolve into religious disputes.
Yes.
So we're talking ultimately here about the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, the natural law that binds all men. It doesn't matter whether you're a Catholic, a Jew, Protestant, a pagan on the hypothetical deserted desert isle. The natural law applies to all men. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, and so on. And so the law has to reflect these divine commands, the natural law, and that is our participation as individual creatures with free will in the eternal law. God has arranged everything in the universe, and he imposes on us the natural law obligation to participate in this eternal law, the arrangement of the universe, by our freely willed choices in accordance with the moral law. And it binds everybody.
Well, so there you have it. Again, an improvement in optics in a certain sense, but still we live in this postmodern liberal world where their principles have been distorted, and we can't forget that. So, well, we'll see. Maybe in 2 weeks we'll go back. I think things may have heated up on the domestic front. We'll see. Either they'll given up on these riots, or probably taking them to another level. But we'll see. We still wait to see what Pope Leo is going to do with the traditional Latin Mass and other liturgical mayhem that was created by Pope Francis. So perhaps we'll have some answers to those questions in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and today we haven't touched on the eruption of war in the Middle East with the attack on Iran, but that will be a good subject by the time we come around again in 2 weeks. If there's still a world.
If there's still a world. So if there's still a world, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Take care. God bless.